The case of Jeffrey Epstein. It's a name we all know, but we're not here to talk about the man himself. Not really. Today, we're looking at something bigger: the architecture of failure. The institutions that were supposed to protect people, but instead, for decades, did the exact opposite. So, our goal here isn't just to rehash what happened, it's to ask why. Why was it allowed to happen? This is a story about systems, about decisions made behind closed doors, and about deafening silence. It's about the institutions that failed to stop him, and it starts long before most people realize. You see, this story doesn't really kick off with the Florida investigation that made all the headlines. No, it starts much, much earlier. It starts with a warning that was completely ignored for a decade. What you're looking at here is a recent letter from Congress. They're demanding answers from the Department of Justice about failures that happened all the way back in the 1990s. The questions being asked today are forcing us to look back at decisions, and really indecisions, that were made a whole generation ago. Just look at this gap. 10 years. An entire decade passed between the moment the FBI was formally warned about Jeffrey Epstein and the day they finally opened an official investigation. Think about everything that can happen in 10 years. And let's be crystal clear about something. This 1996 complaint wasn't some vague tip. The official records show it was incredibly specific, with allegations that should have set off every alarm bell in the building: sexual abuse of minors and the creation of child sexual abuse material. And this is a direct quote from that complaint. It describes not just the horrific crimes, but also direct threats of violence. Threats meant to silence a witness. So the urgency, the danger, it was all right there from day one. So here's the bottom line. The consequence of that inaction was devastating. As Congress itself noted, this wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was a catastrophic failure with a staggering human cost. It allowed a predator to operate completely unchecked for another 10 years. All right, so the story moves from a failure of inaction to a deliberate, calculated act by the justice system itself. A decade after that first warning, Epstein was finally under investigation. But the way it ended, well, that became another monumental failure. And this is where a key figure enters the picture: Alexander Acosta. At the time, he was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. That means he had the power to bring the full weight of the federal government down on Jeffrey Epstein. But instead, he chose to approve a secret deal. Now, the scope of this deal was just staggering. It wasn't your typical plea bargain. It was a blanket of immunity. It protected Epstein, it protected his named associates, and it even protected this vague, shadowy group of potential co-conspirators. And just like that, it shut down the entire federal investigation. And this email, wow, it reveals an absolutely stunning part of the agreement. Prosecutors allegedly promised Epstein's lawyers that they wouldn't even contact the victims. They kept them completely in the dark, which a federal judge later found was a direct violation of their rights. Years later, the Justice Department's own internal board looked into this deal, and while they said there was no professional misconduct, their conclusion was still pretty stark. Acosta used poor judgment. He shut the case down way too early before his own investigators could figure out just how deep this all went. So we've seen a failure of investigation and a failure of prosecution. But there's another really important layer here. It's the powerful social institutions that gave Epstein a cloak of respectability, even as the rumors and allegations got louder and louder. It's a tactic called the philanthropy shield, and it's basically how powerful people can use their money to launder their reputations. You give huge sums to prestigious places like universities, and in return, you buy legitimacy, you buy access, and you create a whole network of people who have a reason to look the other way. So here's how it works. The donation makes you look like a good guy. It gets you in the room with powerful, influential people. And the institution, well, they're grateful for the money, so maybe they're less likely to ask tough questions. It's a system that is just ripe for exploitation. And look, this isn't just a theory. A perfect example is MIT's famous Media Lab. Investigations found they took millions from Epstein even after his 2008 conviction. They even went so far as to disguise the donations, routing them through other people specifically to keep his name off the books. So when you connect all these dots, the ignored warnings, the secret deals, the shields of respectability, you start to see a very clear pattern. And this pattern of systemic failure, it has a name. It's called institutional betrayal. It's a term that describes the unique kind of trauma that happens when the very systems that are supposed to protect you, like law enforcement or the courts or universities, not only fail you, but actually seem to work against you.
But there is an antidote. Researchers call it institutional courage. And it really boils down to a choice. An institution can choose secrecy or it can choose transparency. It can protect the powerful or it can demand accountability. It can punish people who speak out or it can protect them.
And that brings us right back to the present. This question, posed recently by Congress, just hangs over everything. It asks why, even after these failures were exposed, the internal reviews didn't seem to dig deep enough. It suggests the lack of accountability is itself a systemic problem.
You know, the story of Jeffrey Epstein is so often told as the story of one depraved man. But the evidence we've just walked through, it suggests that's just the surface. That's only the first layer. The much deeper story is about the systems that made it all possible.
With Congress still digging and more documents coming to light, the full picture is still taking shape. The crucial question that remains is whether any of this will lead to real, lasting institutional change, or if these same patterns of betrayal will just repeat themselves. The investigation is far from over.